I'm going to take you on, wow, is it going to rain? Maybe they're just stains. So I'm going to take you on a couple of little spots of the site today. And here we have Caesarea Philippi, here north of the Sea of Galilee. It's actually not too far, but it takes a while to get there by car. It's not a freeway. So here we have Mount Hermon. It's been in the news a lot. Caesarea Philippi. And there we have Peter and Jesus in that mosaic. It's up at the north of the Golan. The Golan's across from us. We've often looked up. But then we are here in Magdala. And now we're going to go to our synagogue for a very special reason. And so we come, we have a special break in the readings today, but it's very interesting. The readings we're missing as a result are also very interesting because through the special readings we have a change of pattern, an interruption of our pattern of readings. If we had the normal readings today, we'd be doing also a jump, but it's a very interesting jump and very pedagogical. And it would have been the first verses of chapter 11 of the letter to the Hebrews, speaking about the extraordinary faith of the people in the Old Testament. And it starts off talking about Abel, and it talks about Enoch, and it talks about Noah. And that's very interesting because those are the readings we've been having in the last couple of weeks. And in that sense, it's very instructive because in the New Testament, in the letter to the Hebrews, they're very conscious of Genesis and all the stories of Genesis. And that's very significant because it shows the thread of continuity and the great value of honor your father and your mother in the spiritual sense that all those who have gone before us have handed on the greatest treasure, the treasure of faith. And we have been recipients and beneficiaries of this treasure of faith. And that's very precious. And they're also admired and esteemed for the qualities and the virtues they displayed, that are displayed in those stories of them. And that stimulates us to emulate their lifestyle. And in that sense also is the education of the Old and New Testaments in paying attention to those who have lived the faith, who have been generous, who have gone before us in the sign of faith, who have lived heroic lives many times to be faithful. And only God knows the level of heroism involved in that life and lifestyle, because nobody knows what difficulties a particular person endures inside their own heart and soul. And also the gospel reading we would have had today if we didn't have the 22nd of February would be Saturday of the 6th week, and it would be Mount Tabor. And there was a special experience Peter, James and John had on Mount Tabor. And so we're moving into the second part of Mark's Gospel with that. I think it's chapter 9. And thereby we're really heading towards Jerusalem now that Jesus has been established and understood by the disciples as the Messiah. And we're a moment before that in today's reading with Peter, with the disciples at Caesarea Philippi, which I showed you on the map there. So up in the north, Mount Tabor is off in this direction in southwest of here, not far from Nazareth. I'm coming here to the synagogue because today we have a feast with an unusual kind of name, the Chair of Peter. And here we're looking at the Magdala stone in the floor inside the synagogue, this sculpted stone. And I had the pleasure of having the new book of Rina Talgam in my hands, which the key piece that she gets to explain is the Magdala stone, which is an extraordinary stone. for many reasons, and we won't go into that now. And then this side of this pillar stub, there's another stone with 2 grooves. When American visitors are here, I call this the groovy stone, and we have 2 of those. And these stones are very important in the background to today's celebration, because this stone also has a name, a symbolic name, that maybe where the symbol is actually more important than the stone, and that is the chair of Moses, which really means not just a physical chair where Moses sat, but the teaching authority that Moses had in the Old Testament, and to follow Moses. And Moses taught so much and shaped the whole life of God's people because of the leadership role he had in leading the people out of slavery. So why are we here? Well, today is the Feast of the Chair of Peter. So in ancient times, it wasn't just Moses had a chair. The emperors also, the big kings had chairs. The throne, the royal throne. Actually, I can show you a picture of the excavation when it happened in 2009, and you can see the exact position of the original stone inside on location. And actually, you could see a big scalp was taken out of it over here, where the backhoe of the tractor that was cleaning off the first level of soil hit the stone and took out a scalp of it. And that's the original one. In these 2 copies we have here, they are actually replicas. I say there's no fake news, they're authentic copies. And then we can go over to see that in a moment. But I'll show it to you now because of that. It's been a little bit restored in the copy. They didn't leave that big chunk that was cut out about here on the edge of the stone. So on this corner here, more or less there, one of the what do you call them? The protrusions of the shovel scraped the stone, and that's how the discovery started. Nobody expected that much archaeology so close to the surface. And so this is the 3rd stone of this category we have here, which also has these 2 big grooves on it, and like the other one over beside the pillar there. And it has, with these grooves, the theory now is that, or was actually for a while as well as a possibility, that there were 2 grooves to hold the support of the teva. The teva was a box where the scrolls were kept, and it could be placed on top of that. That's the theory of Renatal Gam. And so we won't go into all the archaeology now. That's not the purpose of our conversation in the stroll and chat, but it's interesting to see it on this day. Oops, no, I did the wrong thing. Sorry. Don't fall down. Come back on your chair. I hope you're okay. I hit the wrong button. I wanted to hit another little button here that I use very little, and it arranges the phone. It can bring it down a little bit like this, because my nose is calling out for a little bit of personal attention, and I'll be back with you in a second. Good. So now this chair then is, let's say, where the Torah would be taught, would be read, would be explained, and then sitting on the chair of Moses was to teach with the authority of the Torah. And basically at the end of the day, that's God's teaching. So now we come to the readings of today, and we're celebrating the service that Peter and his successors, the bishops of Rome, give to the body of Christ, to the church. And that service is a service of teaching. It's a service of confession of faith. And it's really anchored in the gospel we have today, which is a gospel of Caesarea Philippi, where Jesus asks, "Who do people say that I am?" And we also had a more simple version of that in Mark's Gospel a couple of days ago, where then Peter makes his profession of faith. And he says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God," which is an incredible statement. And Peter can't claim that he did that because of his brilliance and brains. He can only be thankful to the Lord that he received that grace, that understanding of faith, and that he had the courage to proclaim it decisively. And that's part of the calling of us Christians, of all people of faith, then in their own faith, to proclaim the faith with great conviction. Actually, the best proclamation of faith is the lifestyle that we live. And Jesus then replies to Peter with remarkable clarity, and he says, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah." That's how we know that Simon and Andrew's daddy was called Jonah, like Jonah and the whale. And we had a guide here 2 days ago, and his name was Jonah. I asked him if he had a son called Simon, which wasn't the case. So if he did, his son could be called in Aramaic Simon Bar Jonah. So anyway, he says, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar Jonah." You're a very concrete Simon. You're the son of Jonah, here a fisherman and from Bethsaida. And his house was actually found in the archaeology in the last couple of years. We've done a couple of live streams from there when the archaeologists were working there. So this very concrete man, Jesus is going to say something very powerful. "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you." Our life as believers, as Christian believers, at least in John's Gospel, the way it's presented in the prologue, is that we are born not of flesh or blood or the will of man, but from God. Of course, those lines in the prologue primarily refer to Jesus himself, but the coming to faith is not the result of rational, logical conclusion. Rational, logical conclusions can prepare our mind and our heart, can prepare our openness for acceptance of the gift of faith. Sometimes we are stubborn and we don't like to, we rebel against it, we don't want it. So this is this major thing, that it's a gift of faith. "And I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." And that word is an Aramaic word originally. Petros is the Greek translation in the vernacular of the time, especially for the writing of the Gospels. And the word in Aramaic would be kephas, which would mean a rock. "On this rock I will build my church." And it's up at the rock face of Caesarea Philippi, which is a very significant face of rock that's, I don't know how high, how to measure it high, how many meters high is it, but it's like you're facing Mount Arbel here, but it actually is basically almost a straight surface, maybe up there near that big cave up there in Mount Arbel. It's the surface more like that, and you have that rock, and on this rock I will build my church. So there's also an implication of the solidity of it, the unmovability of it, still there 2,000 years later, that rock. And then the symbolic nature of it, and in front of the powers of the world, because that was the opening from Hades, according to legend, of the underworld, the mouth of Jordan coming out of the foot of Mount Hermon. It was also the seat of Herod Philip, that's why it's called Caesarea Philippi, Herod Philip, the Tetrarch. And he had built temples, pagan temples, to the god Pan, the god of war and of fear, for battle. And so he says, "I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven." And we remember in the kings of the Old Testament, they had somebody in charge of everything, like a prime minister, somebody with all the authority of the king, and they exercised that, and it was symbolized with the keys. And there's a famous story of Shebna and the removal of an unfaithful, self-aggrandizing prime minister, so to say, and being replaced by God's command. And so then we have the abuse of power also included in that story, and the lack of trust that was carried out by the person, and the trust that was they were entrusted with the power, and they failed in that trust. And so we have that letter of Peter, which is a great lesson for pastors, for people in charge, for leaders. It's a beautiful letter today in the first reading, leading into this feast day. And it's a legacy from Peter and from the first disciples. And he exhorts all those in charge of the community, as a fellow elder and witness to the sufferings of Christ, to tend the flock not by constraint but willingly, not for profit, but to be kind shepherds, to be gentle, not to lord it over people, just like the way Jesus himself was washing feet and serving. So that's an awful lot of content and stuff, and really the key line here for me is the psalm, which is the core of our consolation. The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I should want. And obviously a little baby needs parents, and students need teachers, and communities need leadership, and the church is no exception. Just like Jesus became true God and true man, so the church in all its divine mission and grace and blessing also is a society of human beings that needs leadership. And therefore, Jesus assigns Peter this role. So we can pray for all those in leadership in the church, and especially today for the Holy Father, who's very sick at the moment and frail, only one lung, has pneumonia, and has a big charge, a big responsibility, also looked up to by many places that are even outside of Christianity. So we pray for him today. People, God bless you.